Little pastries and the King of Poland, Duke of Lorraine. What do you think connects them? Well, there is a beautiful story. And this city, Ville de Commercy, okay, they are so proud of that story that even on their website you can see the shape of Madeleine right there, because they claim that it was in 1755 that the King of Poland, who was at that time living there because he was also the Duke of Lorraine, Le Roi Stanislav, or maybe you can help me to pronounce Stanislaw Leszczynski. Any Polish descendant here? No?
Yeah, I'm Polish, but
Leszczynski. Okay, fantastic. I like that. Sounds so much better, right? So one day he has a big reception, and the cook has a fight in the kitchen right before the dessert is to be served, and he leaves. Poor king is devastated. There will be no dessert. Okay, and there is a little girl, or maybe she was not so little, maybe it was a young woman, a cook who makes pastries from the recipe of her grandma. They're so fluffy, they're so wonderful, so light. He loves them. He calls her and he says, "What have you done? This is a miracle. What are they called?" And she said, "Oh, monsieur, I don't know." And he says, "What's your name?" And she says, "Madeleine." And he says, "From now on, they will be called Madeleine." And when his daughter marries a French king, he gives that recipe as her dowry. Thank you. And since then, France has the recipe. And that's why in the 19th century, Ville de Commercy had a tradition where they would make lots of madeleines, and they would go and try to sell as many madeleines as they could at the train station. And so they would be yelling, "Madeleine, Madeleine, Madeleine." And so you see that people would go to the northeast of France just to buy madeleines, because there they were supposedly the best madeleines. So who do you think had the recipe of the authentic Commercy Madeleines? Oh, you know, this is the cook we talked about in our class, and she's an American cook who loved France. Julia Child. Well, you're not in my class, but you knew the answer. Exactly. So she claims that she has the authentic recipe of madeleines in her book. Okay. And now there are books for children that talk about this story, okay? So you can, again, go on that site, and I think they're very endearing. Again, is that the history of Madeleine? No, you can find different versions. Some say that Madeleine Pommier was a cook, a pastry chef, but in the 19th century. Others say that she was a mistress of the king, and that's why he called them after her. So we don't know, okay? I prefer this story because I think it's endearing, right? But it's not the end. The shape of Madeleine is very intriguing. And so another story goes that they were connected to the, I hope it's not my phone, okay, no, to the pilgrims. Because pilgrims used to use that seashell shape to show that they went on the pilgrimage, on a Catholic route that would take you to the Way of St. James, or in French, Saint-Jacques de Compostelle. And so the pilgrims would wear seashells on their costumes to show the good deeds that they actually accomplished. And the story goes that along the road, they finally said, you know, we can make pastries of the same shape to kind of encourage our pilgrims to continue, okay? Well, this is not yet the last story. My favorite story is, of course, Marcel Proust, because in his book, he writes about Madeleine, and it's such a wonderful passage that people start loving Madeleine because they appreciated Proust, but also because I think they wanted to experience what he claims to experience of eating the Madeleine. But again, this is not the complete truth, because in the first version of his writing, it was not une Madeleine. It was a simple toast, un pain grillé. But un pain grillé is nothing romantic, right? And so when he was rewriting it, it became Madeleine, and now we have La Madeleine de Proust, Madeleine of Proust. So who was Marcel Proust? The greatest French author of the 20th century. And I'm exactly. I know, I'm probably, well, I wouldn't say I'm the only one to think so, but definitely Professor to me would contradict me and say, no, Albert Camus, right, or somebody else. But he definitely changed not only the French literature, but also world literature because of the type of writing that he introduced. It's psychological writing. It's not a stream of consciousness. It's not internal monologue. It's everything, because the level of introspection that goes in his writing is so unique, and the tensions of the societal changes that he notices, again, are so profound that simply call it a stream of consciousness would not do justice to the writing of Proust. But before we go into his writing, let's talk really quickly about his family. His mother, the love of his life, because really that was the woman whom he adored and who helped him in pretty much every aspect of his life. Even when he was doing a translation and from English into French of John Ruskin, he didn't speak English. He spoke barely English. His mom spoke English very well. And so he did that translation that became so influential for him thanks to his mom, okay? She was a daughter, and I'll go a little bit, I'll come back to the father, of Nathaniel Vale. And he was a very wealthy bourgeois and Jewish merchant. And at that time, as very often or quite frequently in France, you would get waves of, xenophobic feelings. And he said, you know what? We need to convert her. At least our daughter needs to be Catholic in order to avoid some of the conflicts that were arising at that time. And so she became a Catholic, and she married Adrien Proust. And he was an amazing man too. He comes from a very modest background, and today you would say that he was a self-made man, okay? Because towards the end of his life, he was so recognized by the French government for everything that he has done for the public, introducing the questions of hygiene and helping to combat several epidemic situations in the capital and so on. And I'm just reading this book now. He actually did some of the psychoanalysis, or the beginning of it, with his patients. And so Proust was privileged to witness his father dealing with his clients, with also on a very high governmental level. And he had a brother. As you can see, the brother looks very much like the father, right? And he became a surgeon, so he really kind of went in the steps of the father. So I'll just give you one guess. Do you think the brother is in the book? No. So again, we're not going to psychoanalyze Proust himself here, and it is not an autobiographical novel, but of course it's a novel that uses many instances of his own life, but the evident absence of the brother shows us that this is not an autobiography. And then we also have to honor the brother because it's the brother who finished De Recherche, the 7th volume novel, because Proust dies in 1922. Okay? The last volume will be published in 1927. Okay? So the dedication and love that he felt for his brother, I think, are obvious. And yet, 2 years separate them. Proust was the firstborn, and at the time when he was born, the situation was dreadful. There was nothing to eat in Paris, and the mother really didn't get enough of nutrition. And so when he is born, he's a very fragile boy. And very soon he will develop asthma symptoms. And, you know, at that time it was very scary because any attack, people would think, oh, he's going to die. And so that's why you get a very tight relationship between the mother and the grandmother, because they were really kind of very vigilant about his health. Okay? And also that's why I think he was very hypersensitive, you know, because it got so bad in his life, at the end of his life, that he would ask people who came to visit him to see if they passed by someone who had flowers. So not even having flowers on themselves, but passed by a person who was exposed to flowers so that he would have an asthmatic attack. Okay? And so he would say, no, please don't come in. He was so terrified of being introduced to pollen or other allergens. Why are we here tonight? Because this is the year to remember Proust. In 1913, he published Swann's Way. Okay? This is the first volume of the 7-volume series. Okay? And now everywhere in Chicago, in New York, in Los Angeles, and of course in France, you have events commemorating this event, okay? And when he decided to publish his first volume, do you think publishers like that? Mathieu, can you tell us? Did they like it? No. They said, who is going to read such a big book? And at that time it was just one. And he ended up with 7, okay? He's like, it's about a little boy falling asleep and having a hard time falling asleep. You know what? Nobody's going to read it, okay? And so he actually had to publish the first book on his own account, so he had to pay for it. And, but very soon, some editors started really getting into his writing, and they said, oh, you know, this is modern Flaubert. And do you know Gustave Flaubert, who wrote Madame Bovary? Madame Bovary? No? If you never read it, please do, because he is absolutely brilliant in English or in French. Well, actually in French or in English, but I think in any languages. The tightness of his prose is just unbelievable, and it goes much faster. And it's about a woman who is having an adulterous affair and who is delusioned at the end. How wonderful is to read that, no? It's like, yeah, and she loves shopping, so next time you want to go shopping, think about Emma Bovary. No, better not, because then you will be too depressed. But what you have here is an amazing storytelling and amazing connections, but also amazing experiences. So in Swann's Way, to go back to the Madeleine that I know by now you forgot, was very important moment. This is the moment that will give us difference between voluntary and involuntary memories. And we just went through a discussion of this in my 470 class, and I have 2 students, so I'm going to ask them, do you remember anything from that?
I remember involuntary.
Okay.
It's when, for example, your senses, it's stimulated through senses. Let's say you smell something, it reminds you something, an experience, something that happened in the past.
Perfect. Okay, Matthew, now, do you remember voluntary memory? No.
I remember involuntary more because we did this thing in class where you took like something, it was like chocolate or coffee or something, and we were all closing our eyes and you told us to write what it reminded us of. So.
And wasn't it easy?
Yeah, it was very easy.
It was very easy because your senses were awakened. And that's why we have Madeleine. Because the way the story goes, the second one, not the first one, he's home, it's cold, not like now, because no. Then it would be brandy, right? It would not be Madeleine. So he dips Madeleine in the tea and he takes a bite. And suddenly something happens to him. And he says, oh, what's this feeling? And then the text goes, and you will see just little part of the text, okay? But he says, no sooner had the warm liquid mixed with the crumbs, and that's tea with Madeleine, touched my palate than a shiver ran through me, and I stopped, intent upon the extraordinary thing that was happening to me. An exquisite pleasure had invaded my senses, something isolated, detached, with no suggestion of its origin. And at once the vicissitudes of life had become indifferent to me, its disasters innocuous, its brevity illusory. This new sensation, having had the effect which love has of filling me with a precious essence, or rather this essence was not in me, it was me. That's a wonderful Madeleine, right? So, yeah, I want that Madeleine. Well, go to Starbucks and then try it, and maybe you will get this, because suddenly he felt immortal. He felt connected to his past self. He remembered his childhood, and not only pieces of his childhood, but he remembered it all. And I just love to imagine, I'm just really, how it all came out of this cup of tea. So in that moment, all the flowers in our garden and in Monsieur Swan's park, and the water lilies on the Vivonne, and the good folk of the village, and their little dwellings, and the parish church, and the whole of Cambrai, and its surroundings, taking shape and solidity, sprang into being, town and gardens alike, from my cup of tea. Wonderful. You write this phrase and you're like, this is it. Now I can retire. No. Well, that did not happen for Proust.